Okay, next, I want to talk about a book that connects Churchill with espionage. And as a matter of fact, this book by Thomas Meyer is The Invisible Spy, Churchill's Rockefeller Center spy ring and America's first secret agent of World War II. This is about Ernest Cuneo, who was a very interesting figure. And, just looking at the title of the book, you would think this was Churchill's spy, and in some ways he was. But he really was working as an American and largely with the knowledge of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the American president. So in one sense, you could say he operated in the intelligence world on behalf of both Britain and the United States. But the crucial thing is that he really was instrumental in getting the right information to Winston Churchill when Britain was at war with Nazi Germany. And most importantly, during this crucial period, the United States was not yet at war. And so in one way, you could just see Ernest Cuneo as someone who really was a necessary bridge between Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt through their officers and military personnel, through the intelligence networks that began to develop. And already at this time, it's life or death for Great Britain. And I think FDR very clearly understands it's soon going to be life or death for the United States. And so this is one of those historical works where someone goes back and really unearths a big story. And the story of Ernest Cuneo is a big story. He's identified as America's first secret agent of World War II. And, that's basically what he was. And there are people who are going to debate the story of Cuneo for decades to come. But this is a major work that really tells you a great deal about the story. And, it reminds you also that had the war gone differently, we'd be talking very differently about many of these figures, not to mention our own lives. All right, when it comes to espionage and spycraft, I think a lot of Americans watch The Americans, that television multi-series on embedded illegal Soviet agents in the United States. And the strangest part of the story is it was basically true. And I'm not saying all the events in that special series turned out to be true, but the fact that there were such agents, and frankly, even the stories of how they came about in the Stalinist era and beyond. So here you have the illegals, Russia's most audacious spies, and their century-long mission to infiltrate the West. And so the use of these illegals, well, it's a real spy thriller, to tell you the truth. And by the way, it doesn't always turn out that for every spy there was anything thrilling. One of the things you learn from reading a work like this is how much a spycraft ends up being basically worth nothing. But there are huge issues at stake, and sometimes the kind of information, the kind of espionage that comes through spycraft, it can make a determinative difference. So this is really a book that focuses on the illegals. And the most interesting thing about this from Sean Walker is it's not just about, say, the 1970s and the 80s, even into the 90s. It's about Putin's Russia as well and the ongoing threat that is represented. The use of these illegals comes down to headline news, that broke just in the last couple of years on both sides of the Atlantic. So this is history. Yes, it's history, but it is also, I hesitate to say, it's also something that could burst into headline news tomorrow. Very interesting. Okay, now this is 2 volumes of a 3-volume work. The 2 volumes are out. And let me just say, they're about the Mafia. And you would think that a definitive history of the Mafia in the United States would exist. And there's some very important works. But once again, this is something that's been shrouded in mystery for a long time. The title is Borgata, Clash of Titans, A History of the American Mafia. It's by Louis Ferrante, and it is a 3-volume work, and 2 volumes are out now. And, honestly, I think with the 2nd volume, things get even more interesting because we're a lot closer to contemporary history. But it was really interesting to read that 1st volume and just see how what was basically a Sicilian mob model began to take root in New York City and some other major American cities. And by the time, of course, you reach the midpoint of the 20th century, it's a huge, huge story. And there are debates right now as to how invigorated this same, criminal organization is. But there's no doubt that it played a major role in American history, certainly in many of America's big cities and biggest crime stories in the 20th century. So I recommend it because I found it really interesting, and I'm waiting for that third volume.